The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
With so many people living longer, the fear of outliving your money becomes a reality for many of us. Will I be a financial burden? Will I outlive my money? How will I be remembered? My name is Neil Himmelstein, president of Main Street Planning Group. Please contact me by visiting mainstreetplanninggroup.com. That's mainstreetplanninggroup.com, or call 631-647-4694. I will introduce you to strategies that will guarantee you will not outlive your money, that can guarantee you will not be a burden on your loved ones. Through a collaborative approach, we will uncover solutions that offer tax-efficient strategies, lifetime income, and legacy planning, choice, organization, direction, and education. That is the code we stand behind. Contact mainstreetplanninggroup.com, that's mainstreetplanninggroup.com, or call 631-647-4694. And listen to me every Friday at 3 p.m. as I host the Main Street Code for Financial Success, right here on 103.9 LI News Radio. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Main Street Code for Financial Success. I'm your host, Neil Himmelstein. And when we talk about our code, we talk about choice, organization, direction, and education. And we work with hundreds of advisors across the United States, whether they be attorneys, accountants, or other financial planners that use us to wholesale insurance products like life insurance, annuities, disability, and long-term care. And today we are very fortunate to have with us my special guest, Bill Zalakar. Say hi, Bill.
Thank you, Neil. Nice to be here.
Bill is a general manager of Weiss Greenhouses, as well as past president the last 3 years of the Long Island Farm Bureau, and now is working with the state in policy and different committees regarding agriculture. And I think it's so appropriate today because Bill can tell it best, but agriculture is the largest component, financial and economic component, of Long Island. Bill, would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, Neil, that, in New York, agriculture is the strongest economic driver in all of New York. Suffolk County, when you go back in history, had always been the strongest county, believe it or not. Nobody would ever think of that with what's going on. But we have slipped down to number, I think, 3 now in the state. But still, when you think about that, the economic impact that agriculture has on the county and the state is just phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, from the food we eat, to the air we breathe, to the fish, to the wineries, everything revolves around agriculture.
Yeah. And we hear so much when we talk to different people. People will say, there's no agriculture around me, or I'm not involved with agriculture. But everybody that eats food, which everybody does, is somehow indirectly or directly tied in with agriculture. And it affects every single person. And I think that really became apparent, especially after COVID, when we had the shortages of agricultural products, the food on the shelves in the stores. People started to question, where's our food coming from? And one of the purposes and missions that I have is try to help educate the public and let the people know where the food is coming from, why it costs what it does, and what those reasons are.
Well, I know I've been reading in the paper, and I know because I do a lot of the shopping, I saw eggs almost triple in price over the last 6 months. Yeah. What would you say is the cause of that?
I mean, we have that about a year or so ago, we get the avian influenza that has come down, and it's very destructive to the chicken and poultry industry. And once it is in a farm, all those chickens have to be euthanized. Wow. And it's not just in Long Island or New York, but actually it is across the whole country. And there are millions and millions of chickens that we're losing, on a regular basis. And that's what's driving the cost of eggs up.
Wow. And food prices is certainly something we're all interested in, and we can blame inflation. But when you think about the whole process of food and how it gets delivered to you. There's so many steps involved. I mean, from growing a plant to delivering a plant. Just talk about some of the logistics it takes. By the time I buy that vegetable, what it takes.
Especially here on Long Island, people will question, well, why is the cost of an apple or a tomato so much more expensive at a farm stand than it is, say, at a local grocery store? And there's a number of factors involved there. We all live on Long Island. We all know that we have some of the highest tax bases around, and our expenses are so much more than they are out of state or out of the country. And a lot of the markets are obviously looking for the best price that they can get. So anything coming from out of state usually comes in a lot cheaper, especially labor is one of our largest expenses.
Sure.
And when you look at labor costs in other states, or even when you go to Mexico or Canada, the labor cost is so much different than it is here in New York.
Right.
And that's really one of the key factors. Transportation, with a lot of the regulations and everything that they have in transportation, just keeps driving the cost up more and more. So,
right. So the price of gas, everything comes into play when it comes to buying your food.
Correct. And a lot of people say the farmer is making so much money. A lot of it is not the farmer making money. It's a lot of the middle steps that are all tied in there, that more money is going to each of those areas.
Right. It's fascinating. And we were talking right before the show about how much Long Island produce is sold and consumed here on Long Island.
There's a lot of it. Basically because it gets too expensive to ship the product anywhere else. Years ago, a lot of our product used to go into the Hunts Point market in New York City, which, if anybody knows, Hunts Point is the largest food distributor in the entire world.
Wow.
And that's based right here in the Bronx in New York City.
And how much food per day does Hunts Point, let's say, distribute?
One of the key factors is and we saw this during COVID, if there is a transportation shutdown or something detrimental would happen, Hunts Point only carries enough reserves to feed about 2.5 days.
Wow.
The entire eastern United States.
Wow.
And that's kind of scary. And I think that's what has really made everybody step back and look at the food security that we have and where our food is coming from. And how can we utilize a lot more of the production locally to produce our food and supply all of us?
Interesting. But running a farm is quite expensive. I mean, you have machinery, you have labor, you have taxes, you have regulations. It's expensive. I don't see these farmers seem to be land rich, but not really killing it in a piggy bank per se.
And that's been the philosophy over all the years. The farmers are land wealthy, but cash poor.
Right.
Land has been passed down through generations and carried on. And a lot of times the farmers will leverage that property as the markups have gotten smaller and smaller. The farmers have been forced to leverage their land values, the equity there, to help carry a lot of their operating expenses.
Wow. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you something. If you don't buy fresh food from Long Island, I mean, we have the best tomatoes. We have the best lettuce. We have the best everything, eggs and fresh. And if you're not taking advantage of that and living here, you don't really and have to appreciate what's going on here in Long Island. It's fantastic. But we have a problem. And the problem is, best use of land sometimes is if that farm has to sell their land or pass it on to the next generation, there's a big tax potentially, and a lot of that gets eaten up, and then what happens?
And that's where tax planning and things are so important in the agricultural industry. Over the years, a lot of the large farms have gotten smaller just because they may not have planned properly. And as a generation transfers over, a lot of times things are based on the current value of the land.
Right.
So a lot of these farms may have bought the land for $100 or $1,000 an acre years ago, and now the value of that land is $100,000 an acre or more.
Wow, that's crazy.
And they cannot afford to pay the taxes, so they're left with selling some of that land.
Right. You're listening to the Main Street Code for Financial Success, and I'm here with Bill Zalakar. We're going to be right back after a commercial. If you need to get a hold of me, I'm at 631-647-4694, and we'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back to the Main Street Code for Financial Success. I'm your host, Neil Himmelstein, and I'm here with the famous Bill Zalakar, who is past president the last 3 years of the Long Island Farm Bureau and is a general manager for Weiss greenhouses, which, people don't realize how many greenhouses and nurseries there are on Long Island. I know one thing for sure, you don't even see them half the time, but when you take the train from Manhattan or even Suffolk County all the way out east, and you're flying a plane into MacArthur Airport, the amount of greenhouses we have here is like, wow, we got some huge farms out here, don't we?
At one time, going back after World War II, the area from Sayville out to the Mauritius had the largest concentration of glass greenhouses in the entire United States.
Wow.
And a lot of that was because of the market right in New York City.
Right.
We're so fortunate here, even whether it's vegetable production, nursery, wineries, whatever it may be, the market that we have here being right outside of New York City really helps to build the industry.
Nice.
And a lot of that has changed, though, over the years. And, people have to keep an open mind. The potato industry was so big at one time.
Sure.
The duck industry was the largest concentration of duck producers was right here in the Mauritius area.
I know that. I'm very well aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has changed as development has pushed a lot of that out. And now we're faced with the fact of how to preserve the agricultural industry. And one of the really big helping points was back in the 1970s when Farm Bureau was involved with Suffolk County, and we started the first land preservation program in the entire United States.
And that's big. And that's so important.
It is. It's so important to help preserve and keep agricultural going.
Absolutely, and open spaces and everything else. And it is just so important to the air we breathe, the water we consume, whether it be the fish industry, whether it be the produce industry, whether it be everything revolves around agriculture. And the Farm Bureau has been at the center of all this, and you never hear about them. All we hear on the TV is about oil, we hear about Microsoft, we hear about Apple, all these big corporate things, yet agriculture is the biggest economic engine we have. And many of us don't know about it because we don't hear about it. And one of your missions with the Farm Bureau is education.
Educate, yes. And it is so important to help try to educate everybody on the importance of agriculture and food. Like I said earlier, so many people say, I have no direct involvement with agriculture, but all of us have to eat.
Right.
And when you think about if we ever get to the point where our food comes from other countries, that really puts us as a country, the United States, in a really tight predicament, relying on everybody else for our food.
You're absolutely right. And if you look at Ukraine, it's the breadbasket over there. And this whole Ukraine-Russia thing, the biggest problem is the food. Not having heat, not having oil, all big, but not having that food, not having that breadbasket, not having that economic engine changes the world.
Right.
And right here on Long Island, the way I can help impact that interrelates with what you do is something we were talking about before the break, which is passing that land on to the next generation is heavily, heavily taxed because the government looks at the land. There are some minor farm exemption things, and there's also some different things you can do. But a lot of the families on Long Island, let's face it, our kids grow up and they may not want to work the farm anymore. And now what happens to that farm? The government looks at that farm and they say, okay, what's the value of that farm? It's not the produce we eat. It's that land, because you were saying before the break, at $100,000 an acre and a farm owns 50 acres, 100 acres, you're now talking $5, $10, $20 million. Okay, the government now imposes a tax, both state tax and federal, and a state tax, which in 2025 is supposed to go back down again. People say, well, I'm not worth $5 million. I'm not worth $10 million. Yeah, but I may have $20, $30 million in land value, maybe not working a farm. I may be making $50,000, $100,000 a year, but that land value is so heavily taxed that the government, going to the next generation, wants that piece, could be as high as 50, 60% of that money when you take federal. And then where's that money going to come from to keep that farm in the family if they don't work it? So one of the big answers, I hate to say it, I don't hate to say it, I like to say it, but there's a big need for life insurance and life insurance planning to help pay that tax so that the family can keep their farm and keep that land, and we can preserve the land on Long Island. And life insurance plays a vital role in helping that transition from family, whether it's a farm, whether it's a business, whether it's your personal life, transition that money so that we can keep the farm and go to the next generation and build and grow from there. And I think farms are so important. Listen, this is why I want to really be involved with the Farm Bureau and what you're doing, Bill, because I see the problem out there. I see the potential. Now, in 2 years, 2025, the estate tax is going to sunset, and it's going to go back down to half of what it is today. Go back down to previous levels. And why? Because the government needs money to operate. We keep talking about the debt ceiling and everything else. Where are they looking to get the money from? So the easiest place to get the money from is from the people that have the money. So estate taxes is going to be back on the table. I'm really surprised they didn't do it earlier, but they know this law is sunsetting, and that's going to be the next big fight in Congress from the financial world. But the farms are so integral in all of this. And as a matter of fact, one other thing I did want to talk to you about today, not just that, but New York State just released a state budget. And in that state budget, the farms, there's some really great farm provisions because the state realizes how important the farm community is to the rest of the economy. And I think they boosted a lot of money towards the farm. You ought to know, I know it was like 75 million I was reading about, because I'm looking over all the provision. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things that the governor has put into our budget that would really benefit our industry is investment tax credit. In the past, it's been about 4%, and she has in there to raise it to 20% refundable. This is a great opportunity for a lot of the agricultural producers out there to start to invest in their businesses, buy new equipment, look at upgrading everything, and have those credits available to help them. We're pressured so much by, everybody hears about climate change and going to all electric cars and things like that. Well, look at our industry. Have you ever seen an electric tractor?
No.
And these are all things that we all have to be pushing for. And we do want to comply. We see the value in all these changes. Our industry wants to. It's just that we need to help to try to get to that next step. So those credits like that are very beneficial and help us out a lot.
Excellent. And then you also have a huge amount of labor that you guys use. And, well, our show is ending, and I want to have you back for another show because this is just a fascinating topic. It's a huge topic. They don't teach this topic in business school, and I'm very fortunate to have Bill Zalakar with me. You've been listening to the Main Street Code for Financial Success. I'm Neil Himmelstein. I can be reached at 631-647-4694. Bill, how can they reach you if they want to reach out to you?
You can reach me at 631-831-5924.
Fantastic, and thank you for what a great guest, and I want to have you back if that's okay with you.
That would be great.
And thanks again, and have a great day, everybody.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.